There used to be these language courses that you buy on tape, and they were designed to be listened to in your sleep. You're supposed to fall asleep listening to these language lectures on cassette tape. You'd wake up and you'd be fluent in another language. There's been a couple of incidents of people who've been in a car accident or a coma or something, and they wake up with an entirely different accent from another part of the world. Their voice has changed, they have some foreign accent suddenly, and they haven't been listening to tapes at all. So maybe they're just coincidence. The people who listen to them happen to also fall into a coma as well that night, and they wake up speaking a different language, and they think, oh, the tape worked, that's amazing. And that just needs to happen to 2 or 3 people out of hundreds of thousands of customers, because those 2 or 3 people will be featured on the news everywhere. Everyone will hear it and they say, oh, I heard about that language course cassette tape. I've heard a couple of people on the news who went and tried that one night, and they woke up the next morning and not only were they fluent in another language, they had a different accent and everything. That might be what happened with that. I remember when I was a child, we were taught, well, as a teenager, I was taught French, belatedly. I say belatedly because the ideal time to learn a new language is when you're 4 or 5 or 6. But in this country, they spend the whole of primary school teaching you Irish as your second language. Then you get to around 13 and all your ability to absorb new languages is fading. And then they tell you, oh, you can learn French and Spanish or German now. Now you can start learning those. And you learn fuck all. Except Frere Jackques. You learn the Frere Jackques song. Have you ever heard that? They like to teach that in school. They go, Frere Jackques, Frere Jackques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous. And then sometimes you get the English version. Something along the lines of, are you sleeping? Are you sleeping? Brother John, Brother John, something, something, something. All the bells are ringing. Ding, ding, dong, ding, ding, dong. This fella is going, are you sleeping? And if he doesn't get a response, he'll take that as a yes, which I know is not ideal. Someone could be sleeping and just pretending to be asleep and not responding. It's the best he can do. And of course, another possible interpretation is that it's a religious brother, like a monk or something. Because we have a lot of those here. We had when I was a child, there were schools that were run by religious brothers. They were a bit like monks, but they run schools and they live in a house next to a school and they run the school. And they're called Christian brothers or Marist brothers or something. There was this fella called Ignatius something or other, who I think is a saint. And if you went to a Christian brother school, you looked in the corner, there's a library corner in your classroom, and you looked through all the books. They said, you're going to read now, pick a book from the library. And we looked through all these books trying to find something vaguely interesting to read. You come across what looked like a comic book. You take it out, you bring it back to your desk. You think you found the one comic book, you go to read that for the next half hour. And you open it up and you realise it's a cartoon history of Brother Ignatius something or other who founded the Christian Brother schools. You think, oh Christ, is this? There was nothing else in cartoon form. And even when they were teaching us Irish, about 10:30 every morning in primary school, they'd say, okay, everyone come over here and sit on the floor over here on the carpeted area. We're going to look at a thing on the projector screen. And they'd get out the projector. And you'd look at some pictures on the projection screen, and there were pictures of scenes. They'd have a scene that was a family in a sitting room watching television. It was like Where's Waldo, but not as complicated. The teacher would go, tell me what that fella's doing there in Irish. And you say, tá sé ag urinating, or whatever he was doing. You go, tá sé ag something, something, something. And the teacher will go, now say it properly with the correct grammar. And you'll say, certainly, madam. Tá sé ag, I don't know. Maybe you should ask someone else. And the teacher will say that in Irish. And you'll say, how do I say ask someone else? And the teacher will say, think it through, one word at a time. Think of the Irish for maybe, and then the Irish for you, and then the Irish for should, and the Irish for ask, and the Irish for someone, and the Irish for something else. Think of all those words and then jumble them up in a completely different order, because that's how the fucking Irish language works. And of course then you'll still have the grammar wrong. Well, at least you'll have got to look at this nice picture up on the screen. But we're done with our Irish class now. Go back to your desks and we'll teach you maths for an hour. So we do maths in a formal location, sitting at a desk. Maths is about accuracy. It's not about relaxing on the floor, watching things, looking at pictures. Maths is about accuracy. Get out your protractors and your gun. No, not your guns. Did I say guns? No, don't take out your guns. Leave your guns where... Oh, that's what they're doing now here. The government is going to ban cell phones in the classroom, but they're not banning guns. And the reason for that is that children don't have guns in classrooms in this country. They have phones, but not guns. So they said, no, there's no guns, so we don't need to do anything about the guns because we're not a nation of psychopaths. So we don't have to ban guns in the classroom. Maybe they should anyway. They're probably illegal as it is. There's probably some technicality somewhere in the law. It's never come up. Nobody goes around shooting people in classrooms here. But there's probably something in the law here that says you can't use a gun in the classroom. And in fact, you can't even have one. I went over to America once to some sort of a shopping centre. They're all walking around with their guns going, if you break into that shop there, I'm going to shoot you with this gun. And then you say, of course, now, where did you get that gun? Is it stolen? And they'll say, no, it hasn't been stolen yet. And anyone who does try to steal it, I tell you, they'll rip it from my dead cold hands. I'll probably delete this bit. This is getting a bit weird now. Oh yes, I was talking about the languages. About how they teach languages in this country. They tell you, age 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, that's when you absorb language the best. So we're going to teach you Irish because you need to be extremely fluent in Irish because you're going to use that for nothing. Not that there's anything wrong with learning Irish. You don't need to use your best language acquiring years. Learn that when you're a teenager, when you just need to learn a bit of it. And of course you're probably thinking, wait a minute, why is he speaking English? Well, I'm speaking English so that you can understand me, first of all. I'm also speaking English so that I can understand me, and so that you can understand me. And also because I don't speak... Nobody speaks Irish here. It's not a thing. We speak English. Said English. I know it's from the country next door. The whole fucking point of a language is you can speak to other people. And the country next door, I can tell you the one thing they are. Whatever you say about them, you can be damn sure that Christ as hell they are other people. Right next door to here. In fact, not just right next door. Their attic extends over to the top of our house. I know it's not really a house, but the island of Ireland, the top part of it, which would be an attic if it was a house, is occupied by the house next door. So it's like you're in a terraced house and the people next door somehow have the use of the attic over your house. I don't know, maybe some sort of weird subdivided apartment or something. They have access to the attic over your house. So not only are they the people next door, they're the people upstairs. And I tell you, they're quite noisy upstairs. They were quite noisy, especially in the 70s and 80s. They made a lot of noise up there. And now that I think about it, there were guns involved. So we do have guns here. Despite what I said earlier, we do have guns here.
Into your head, into your head, into your head, into your head, into your head.
We've a lot to get on with today. Items that need to be attended to. Issues that need to be addressed. Topics. Oh, topics. We've got lots and lots of topics. We're positively booming to the seams with topics. We've got topics coming out of... Oh, I have a quandary here now. I just realised I have an itchy hand. And a minute ago I was scratching this hand with a piece of Velcro. I also have the cap of a bottle of Coke in the other hand, and that's quite good, I find, for scratching the palm of your hand. If you have an itchy palm of your hand, you could do worse than use the lid of a bottle of Coke. If you happen to have an open bottle of Coke in your hand at the time, if you have a bottle top and no bottle, that leads the question, what are you doing with that bottle top? You're probably using it to measure out drugs. Well, be careful about that, because if you put them into the Coke bottle top and that's slightly damp, you leave pills in there for a few minutes, they're just going to disintegrate. And you won't be able to swallow them then, I can tell you, because they'll be disgusting. And you'll have wasted your pharmaceuticals. You'll have to go down to your doctor and say, hello, would you mind giving me another prescription? I wasted this shit by trying to measure it in a Coke bottle top. And he'll say, excuse me, did I not give you one of those cylindrical dispensers for that? I got my assistant to measure everything out and put them in this plastic thing that's got a compartment for each day with all your meds separated, like an advent calendar. If you're on a complicated pharmaceutical regime, they measure out your prescriptions into these little compartments. So you say, oh, it's Monday today, so I'll open the Monday compartment. But if you open the Monday compartment, which involves breaking a bit of see-through plastic and tearing it off, it's very, very easy to accidentally open part of the Tuesday one as well. Now, that's not a problem if they're dry pills, like you just be careful not to let them spill out. But if you're taking liquid medicines, you might be taking the liquid version of one of your meds now. And if they're in that compartment, that's going to spill out very easily. And it's going to be very hard to measure it or put it back in or figure out if you got it all into your mouth. Now that I think of it, maybe they don't put liquids in those things. They probably don't. Maybe they should though. Because if they did, that would inspire the manufacturers to work on solutions to that problem. For example, they might put the liquids in one of those little... You know when you get a pizza and they give you garlic sauce? A little plastic pot with a sealed lid on it. They put the liquid medicines into one of them inside. I suppose that's a bit wasteful. They have a double container then. No, forget I said that. I suppose the other thing you could do is put the liquid inside an edible capsule. Maybe that's what they do. Maybe that's why we've never seen one of these Advent pill dispensers with liquid in them, because they put the liquid inside a pill capsule. So I suppose that's possible. I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking, I've looked at a map of Ireland, and as far as I could make out, it looks like a bear. It doesn't look like any bear I know, anyone from outside. Because outside of Ireland, the bears that you people know are real bears. They're these big things that eat your head off. You see them on some episodes of I Shouldn't Be Alive. I was watching an episode of I Shouldn't Be Alive, where this fella gets mauled by a bear and nearly dies. Well, that's not the type of bear that Ireland is shaped like. If you look at Ireland on a map, it looks like a teddy bear, which isn't a real bear at all. It looks like a teddy bear viewed from its left side as looking west, and its head is kind of obscured by 800 years of occupation or something, wherever it is. A bear, of course. A teddy bear doesn't have an occupation. Teddy bears aren't real. They don't have an occupation, unless you count being an emotional support inanimate animal. I suppose there's that. People like to mock the idea of having an emotional support animal. But then they'll see someone with a teddy bear or a doll bringing it everywhere because they're a child, and they say, no, they're perfectly fine with that. Your child has an emotional support inanimate object, and that's perfectly fine. You think it's perfectly healthy for them to get their emotional support from an inanimate object. But no, if they get it from an animal, that's wrong. They get it from another being, that's wrong. I had lots of these inanimate objects growing up. I had a teddy bear called Bowsy, who I put in a skip around 4 or 5 years ago when we moved house. I threw him in a skip. He was about 30 years old. I suppose you could think of him as an emotional support animal. Now, obviously, I'd used him up by then. I didn't feel the need to have him anymore. I would have liked to keep him. My cat, Bowsy II, used to use him as a physical support animal for the last 10 years because he used him as a cat bed and pretty much destroyed him. Bowsy the bear was destroyed by Bowsy the cat. I kind of regret not holding on to Bowsy the bear because Bowsy the cat died earlier this year, so there's no Bowsies at all left now. You're not going to name another cat Bowsy this soon. No. One thing I've learned, you don't reuse cat names too soon. You wait for 10 or 15 years and then you think maybe I can have another cat called Kofi the Third. The last cat I had called Kofi the Third died some time ago, so I might be okay to have another Kofi the Third soon. I don't know though. I'm getting a bit tired of naming cats after Directors General of the United Nations, especially since the United Nations is probably going to go away soon. From what little I understand of international affairs, the United Nations is just going to disappear. It's going to turn to mush. I named a cat after Ban Ki-moon. I named 2 cats after Kofi Annan. I didn't really have a Kofi the Third. I made that up. We had 2 Kofis though. We had 2 Kofis and a Baggy. And then was there another one? I thought there was another cat who I named after a Secretary General of the United Nations. You would think I would remember that, but no. We've had quite a lot of cats. I have a cat name database for when we get new cats. The latest ones are called Oki and Odie. And those aren't named after Secretaries General of the United Nations. For one thing, you'd have to be going through a period where we have 2 joint Secretaries General of the United Nations. And if someone was doing that, I would not name a cat after a Secretary General of the United Nations who couldn't do their job on their own. Because that's a weak Secretary General. Unless I suppose they're job sharing. Maybe they're job sharing, I suppose. That's perfectly reasonable. We do that in the public service here. If you decide you're going to go off and raise a family 2 days a week and then you work the other 3 days and then someone else does your job the other 2 days, that's perfectly reasonable. So I take that back. If there were 2 joint Secretaries General of the United Nations but they were job sharing for family reasons, that's fine. I'd be happy to name a cat after one of them or both of them. Now that's the thing. If there was 2 Secretaries General of the United Nations and they're job sharing, do you name 2 cats after them? Do you name 1 cat after one of them or 1 cat after the other? Or do they both have the same name? Maybe the 2 Secretaries General who are job sharing both use the same name. I suppose it would help if they were twins. It'd be like on that American situation comedy. I believe it was called Full House. How they had a toddler in that who was played by 2 different children, so they didn't overwork the 2 child actors. They would take turns playing this toddler. Now, if they did that for Secretaries General of the United Nations, well, that would be job sharing. But would they both have the same name and identity while they were at work? One would adopt that identity while they were at work, and then they go home on their off days, and the other Secretary General would use that name. I think some countries would consider that suspicious. I wouldn't recommend that.
Into your head.
Now, I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking, I disagree with him about that. I disagree with him and his analysis of the future of the United Nations. Well, that's fine. I don't understand anything about international affairs. I've actually no idea what's happening with the United Nations or how changing geopolitics is going to affect it or not. I just understand there's people going, oh, that fella, he's been elected now and he doesn't like the UN. That's all I know. I don't know what's going to happen. You're entitled to know what's going to happen. You're just not going to get it from me. When I mention the United Nations in passing, and then continue to mention it in passing in a 10-minute segment about how I've named several cats after former Secretaries General of the United Nations, please don't take it as a serious discussion or analysis of the current geopolitical situation. I know very little about these things. I don't even know where the UN is. Where's the UN? There's a place in New York. Is that the UN headquarters, or is that just their stadium where they go for meetings? Do they have a stadium for meetings? I don't know. You see some of these places. Some of these international organizations, they have these places where they have so many people going to them that you have to have basically an indoor stadium. An indoor stadium. You look at the European Parliament, it's a big, huge thing with people sitting around rows and rows and rows of people with interpreters in their headphones. The only reason they put a roof on that place is because otherwise it will look like a stadium. And they don't want the place where they do the European Parliament stuff or the United Nations stuff to look like a stadium. I don't really understand why. What's wrong with having it look like a stadium? You go to see Queen or whoever you go to see for your music thing. You see them in a stadium, you take it as a sign that they're at the top of their game. If you go to see your favourite band and they're playing a huge arena tour and a stadium tour, and you go and see them at some stadium that's usually used for football or something, and you see them there, you think, oh Christ, they're at the top of their game. Or else it's Live Aid. If you go to Live Aid, people say, oh look, that fella's there, he's trying to change the world and save everyone. But if the UN or the EU had their meetings in a stadium like that, just like they did with Live Aid, you'd go, oh no, that's not a serious event at all. That's not a serious event at all. That's no more serious than that gimmicky People's Parliament that they have sometimes. They have a People's Parliament or a Children's Parliament sometimes. And they meet up in some arena. They have these children, they turned up looking all nerdy, and they stand up and say stuff, and the adults cringe. That's probably what the stadiums make people think of, so they don't put the proper adult parliament in a stadium. They put it in a thing that's just like a parliament meeting house, but they make it look as small as possible by putting a roof on it, making it kind of cramped. And then they hide all the facilities like the bar somewhere else. They don't show the toilets. If you watch parliamentary proceedings, like in the Irish Dáil, or the British House of Commons, or the American Senate on television, you don't see people going up and down the stairs and then into the toilet and then calling over some fella with a hot dog stand. They should do that. It would be an efficient way. I'd much rather have our politicians and public servants being served their hot dog in their seat while they attend Parliament, rather than go to somewhere off camera and queue for their lunch and then they miss 15 minutes of some important debate or speech. It's far more efficient. And there's no shame in it. There's no shame in eating at your desk. There was a time in every office in the old days. I used to have a tea lady who'd come round with a trolley. That was a big thing. People would sit at their desk and she'd bring round the tea and you'd pick a cake off the trolley. There was a cartoon strip. It was made into a radio comedy series about this fella. His name was beginning with B. There was some fella in his 50s working in some office. It was basically a radio situation comedy. What was it called? Something beginning with B. And every episode of that, the tea lady would come round and he'd say, oh, look, what cakes do you have today? I'll have a cake. Now, to be fair, that doesn't make it sound very serious at all. But that was in the context of a situation comedy being made about the situation. I think of that now in a real drama series or a documentary series. If you see people sitting at their desks and being brought tea around to them on a trolley, the first thing you'll think is those people are hard working. They stay at their desks. A beverage is brought to them so they don't die of thirst or starvation from working too hard. And they get shit done. So if you're watching your country's parliament on television and some fella's sitting there and they come around with a trolley with a hot dog, teas and cakes and they give them that in their seat while they watch the debate, that should not be something you judge badly. But you will, and that's why they'll never do it. You're holding our country back by judging them like that. You're holding us back. Now I know what you're thinking there. How are you going to get a hot dog trolley down the steps? Well, stadiums have steps as well. I'm sure they manage somehow. How does it work in a stadium? Well, I'm sure they manage somehow. I've only been to 2 large sporting events in my life. I've been to, I think it was rugby, New Zealand All Blacks versus Leinster, and it was snowing. I don't remember how it worked there with the hot dogs. I didn't really notice it. I do remember queuing for beer and getting it in some plastic cup, glass thing. And it dribbles all over the place and you carry it into the stadium with you. And then I went to a soccer final, Bray versus somewhere else. And that was pretty much the same thing. So I don't know. Didn't really take notice of what happens with the trolleys. Maybe they fold away or something when they're going down the steps. When they put you on an ambulance on the trolley wheels fold away under us. They can just slide you in. I presume they can make a hot dog trolley that works like that when you bring it down the steps. An inflatable base. So when they get to the steps, you level. I'm sure there are ways around it. There must be ways around it because they have hot dog vendors in stadiums. And stadiums, I know for a fact, have steps. They have steps. And people go around because I see this on US sitcoms especially and on Family Guy. People sit there watching the game and someone comes round with hot dogs and sells them and they get handed it to them in their seat. So they must be bringing them down the steps somehow. I suppose maybe they're leaving the trolley at the top of the steps and just carrying the hot dogs down. Could that be it? That would be hard to get someone's attention, surely. You're a hot dog salesperson and you're trying to sell stuff. You walk down the steps, you leave your trolley at the top of the steps, so you walk down the steps. There's people sitting halfway along that road there, they're not on the aisles. So you need to get their attention. You don't even have a trolley to get their attention. How does that work? You're supposed to go, ask that fella 10 seats in that row, please, if he wants to purchase a hot dog off me. It'll be like Chinese whispers. Whoever's at the beginning of that row in the aisle seat will be asked to pass the message on to everyone in that row saying there's hot dogs available for sale here. By the time it gets to the middle of the row, that'll have turned into the hot dog equivalent of send 3 and 4 pence, we're going to a dance. Now for you young people, there's a thing where people tell you there's Chinese whispers and someone will send out a message saying, send reinforcements, we're going to advance. And a message like that gets sent on from person to person, then gets changed along the way inadvertently. And the last person will hear, send 3 and 4 pence, we're going to a dance. Now that could happen with hot dogs. Whoever's in the middle gets stop frogs. What does that mean? You should read the Christing, figure it out. You're intelligent enough to enjoy a complex ball game from up in the air there looking down on this field and you can follow that for an hour and a half. Surely you can figure out, if you hear there's brought hogs for sale, you can figure out that they're trying to tell you there's hot dogs and the hot dog vendor is at the end of that row. You can send a message back saying, yes, please. Just say yes, please. Surely the Christ, that's not going to be twisted. I know you have to pass your reply back along 10 people, but yes isn't complicated. You just go yes. They pass it along, they say yes, 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 yes. And he gets to the hot dog vendor and he says, oh good, we have a sale. And then you'll pass the instructions along. You'll say, certainly sir, would you like ketchup? And that'll get passed along. Certainly, girl, would you like ketchup? And by the time it gets to you, you'll hear, certainly, mer, do you like catsup? Surely to Christ you can figure out that he's asking you whether you want ketchup. Surely to Christ. Unless you're completely new to this thing. But most people who go to these stadiums, they've been doing their whole their lives. They've been raised as sports enjoyers. They'll be well trained in it. So I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. Once upon a time, there was a dog. A dog. A dog. Basically a dog. And this dog, he was sitting outside his owner's house, minding his own business, sitting on the wall, which may surprise you. The dog was sitting on the wall. Now, it's not what you think. I'm well aware that dogs don't generally climb up onto walls and sit on them. They would if they could, but they'd probably just drool all over everything and cause everything to collapse with the moisture. But no, this is a wall. I grew up on a small mountain called Bray Head. I lived there for about a decade, I think. And we were up on this hill. We were living in these houses up on the hill on a steep road. And many of the houses, the front garden was a couple of feet above the road and the pavement. You could easily walk up onto the lawn from the driveway, and then you'd go to the front edge of the lawn and effectively you're on a wall there. So this dog may well have not even realised he was on a wall. As far as he was concerned, there was just a little bit of concrete at the edge of the front lawn. Now, he would have realised that it was a wall after he fell off if he'd done that. Well, he's not going to do that. Why would he do that? It's his own territory. He knows his own territory very well, especially the front perimeter of it. He knows that if he goes over that way, he's going to fall down and he's going to look like a fucking idiot in front of all the passing prowlers who he's trying to protect the house from. So all these passing prowlers, they walk up and down these neighbourhoods and they look for somewhere where it looks like they have an incompetent dog. And you might think, why don't they just go to the house that has no dog at all? Well, they want to go to the house that has an incompetent dog for a number of reasons. Firstly, if there's an incompetent dog, it means the owners may well have a false sense of security. They think their house is being guarded by the dog, but it's not. So the owners will be very relaxed about this. They'll probably leave a window open and say, oh, our dog is going to look after us. We don't have to worry about locking anything. And maybe you're thinking, wait a minute, just because there's an incompetent dog, that doesn't mean they have incompetent owners. Well, I know that. Well, firstly, that dog's incompetence didn't come out of nowhere. That dog was trained by these incompetent people, and that's why the dog is incompetent. May well be incontinent as well. I don't know if that'll protect against passing prowlers, maybe not. I remember when I was a child, someone came around one day with Neighbourhood Watch stickers. They said, put one of these on the front window or front door of your house and one on the back, and that'll mean you're officially a Neighbourhood Watch neighbourhood. So he put these stickers up, and I was under the impression as a child that it meant there was someone constantly walking up and down the road all day and all night, keeping watch, watching out if we weren't being broken into. Well, no, it turns out it just means there's a meeting every 3 years between a few residents and the local police, and they say, here's some things you need to know about, God knows what. God knows what. Well, does he? Maybe he doesn't, I don't know. When you hear that, you probably can't. It would be nice if you could, but I suspect I have the noise filters turned up to a setting where you can't hear me going. If you can't hear, I'm making a popping noise with my mouth. I'm slamming my lips open and closed. And I'm enjoying it, but there's a few times where every 4 or 5 pops, I lose control of it and it lets out a bit of wind or something and makes an unpleasant kind of raspberry sound or something. I don't know what you call it. I don't like that. That's why I need to practice it. So I'll find out during the editing process whether it is coming true when I go. And if it turns out that it does come true, I'll be doing more of this on the programming, getting more practice there, because practice makes perfect. It's just like with the dog thing. So I probably started this segment with one, did I? Maybe I did. Where I went, once upon a time there was a dog. A dog. Regular listeners will have noticed, I'm sure, that I'm getting progressively better and better at that. I'm sure the same will happen with my... But I just have to make sure that it's coming through on the audio. Because if it's not, I'm sure as hell not going to fix that. I don't want to be creating extra work for myself just so I can go. Maybe I can just do that in my spare time. That's probably what you're thinking. Why don't you just do that in your spare time? You don't need to tell us about it or have us hear it. But this is my spare time. I'm podcasting as a hobby. This is literally a pastime. This is what I do in my spare time. So if you're telling me that I should go in my own spare time, that's now. This is spare time that I have. I know it may not sound like that. I know it sounds to you like this is some program that comes from the British Broadcasting Corporation World Service or something. And every week or so, someone does this and they make a podcast out of it. So it can be broadcast into faraway lands where radio is being banned and the only way they can access news and entertainment and information is through the internet, and they have to call it something like Into Your Head. They can't put BBC on it because they'll get blocked. Some hellhole government somewhere is blocking all the outside news sources, and you only let in things that are called Into Your Head and appear to be done by someone like me who spends half the time going... Now, that problem there as well, now that I think about it, it was probably going to raise suspicion among some of those parts of the world that this is some sort of code that I'm transmitting. And it's probably trying to figure out to say, oh, he's going, is that Morse code? Let's try and figure it out. That's probably Morse code. Get her computer onto that. They'll be in one of those countries where it's a hellhole, shithole country, but they do have computers. They're very good at computers. So they'll say, oh, get the computer fella onto that. Run that through his computer. There's a fella going, I want you to record that and run it through your computer and see what he can make of it. They'll have this IT fella. He'll say, okay, now when you say record that, it's already a recording. It's a podcast. And the boss will say, I don't need to know the fucking details. Don't tell me how to do that. Yeah, the electrician doesn't come in here and tell me all about which wire he's going to connect to which thing. No, I don't need to know that. Just figure out the code that this fella is doing. He's going, in fact, now that you mentioned it, is that even, maybe that's being inserted. Because he's going in the middle of a sentence, but it doesn't sound like his voice at all. That could be someone else inserting that afterwards. Someone else might be hijacking his feed and inserting the noise. Although now that you mention it, he seems to know when to stop and allow for the noise to be put in. No, that doesn't really make sense, does it? Does it make sense? Anyway, they get the computer fella onto that, and eventually they'll figure out that it's just meaningless drivel by some fella who does this as his pastime. And you probably begrudge me that. You probably begrudge me using part of my pastime and my spare time to develop new mouth noises that I might enjoy doing. You begrudge me that for some reason, which I think that's very unkind of you.
Are you going into your head?
I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking, I wonder, is this nearly finished? I quite like this program, but in small doses. I can't just listen to hours and hours of it. It seems to have been going for quite a while now. Well, that's true. It's been going since 2006, although there was a 7-year interlude at one point. But no, I think you're probably referring to the length of the episode. And you're right there. I'm getting a bit sick of it as well. I hope it ends soon. In fact, the only reason I've started another segment here is to hopefully create a coherent ending where I go, this is the end of the program, goodbye, or words to that effect. Maybe better chosen words. I have several times in the past gone, this is the end of the program, goodbye. And it sounds a bit blunt. This is the end of the program, goodbye. No, don't do that to people. Don't do that to people. You spent an hour gently introducing them to the program. For some of you who have been listening to this for the past half hour or 3/4 of an hour or whatever it is, and you're only now easing into it. And if I go, this is the end of the program, goodbye, that's going to just jerk you out of it. It's going to give you an awful shock. You're going to wake up on some hospital bed somewhere. You think, what in the name of Christ just happened? I just had the weirdest dream. Either that or I was listening to a podcast that didn't have a proper ending. Or I just learned French in my sleep. Or I don't know. I just got kicked out of the UN because the Americans cancelled the UN or something. Or I just ate a very dodgy hot dog that was passed to me along a row by 10 other audience members. Or members of the European Parliament, as they're called here. I've heard some of you Americans, incidentally, on podcasts, particularly the tech shows presented by Leo Laporte and friends. Oh, no, wait, am I thinking of No Agenda? Some of these podcasts by people who claim to know stuff, they refer to ministers of the European Parliament when they're referring to MEPs, which are in fact members of the European Parliament. You're promoting them above their station. They're not ministers, they're just members. Get your facts right. I don't go around saying, I go around saying a lot of stuff as it happens about your country. But I don't go claiming to be an authority on it. No, at least I hope not. I hope I've made it abundantly clear that I'm not an authority on anything in the real world. I'm just an authority on creating nonsense. Creating absolute nonsense. Anyway, should I play the national anthem now? Because that's what you do at the end of things in stadiums. Hang on. No. I'm going to count backwards from 10 to 0, but I'm going to do it backwards. This may confuse you a little. Sometimes when it's putting you to sleep, the anethesist will say, I want you to count backwards from 10 to 0. And you get confused because you say, if you're counting backwards from 10 to 0, that would mean you're going from 0 to 10. And then they'll have to explain. They'll say, no, I mean, 10 to 0 is backwards. That's the way I'm going to do it. I didn't mean take the concept of counting from 10 to 0 and twist it and do it backwards, which in fact would be counting forwards from 1 to 10. And of course, by the time you've figured all this out, you're asleep. And it's had the exact same effect as just having you count backwards. So it's all the same. An innovative anesthesiologist will do that just to keep everyone fresh and novel and not have the same thing happening every time. Anyway, I'm going to count backwards from 10 to 0. And by the time I get to 0, you'll have finished listening to this program and it'll be all over. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5,